You can start designing your dream life and steadily working towards it today. But the reality is, most people won't. Between working a soul-sucking job, sinking time into distractions and mindless scrolling, and constantly feeling like there aren't enough hours in the day, believe me, I get it. Creating an intentional life can feel like exactly that, a pipe dream. But today, I want to share the exact blueprint I use to go from feeling empty, overwhelmed, and stuck to creating a life on my terms. Hi, if we haven't met yet, I'm Sophie, the creator of Intentional View. And for the past few years, I've been borderline obsessed with one question. How do you step off the daily hamster wheel and start designing a life that actually feels like yours? I've read the books, I've tried the planners, and I've tried the productivity hacks. I've failed, regrouped, and tried again. And through all of that, I've got a much better grip on what actually works and what doesn't. And now I want to share that with you so you don't have to waste years figuring it all out yourself. Okay guys, I'm actually super excited for this video today. This is basically going to be like my whole intentional living philosophy distilled down into one framework. Also, if you want to put any of this into action, then it's a great chance for me to mention my Intentional Life OS. I will leave a link in the description below, but it's essentially my personal life management system and it covers all of the core topics that we'll go through in this video. So if you want to learn more about that, then do check it out. All right, let's get into it. Pillar 1 is to know your why. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see when people start trying to live more intentionally is that they essentially do it backwards. They will dive straight into goal setting or start trying to build new habits from scratch. And those things aren't necessarily bad, but on their own, they rarely lead to the kind of sustainable or lasting change that most people are looking for. Why? Because it's like trying to build a house on sand. There are essentially no solid foundations. Underneath the goal setting and the habit trackers and the color-coded planners, what I've come to realize is that there's a deeper layer that a lot of people overlook and that isn't really talked about that much, but it's so important. And if that foundation isn't in place, the rest just doesn't stick. True intentional living, as I see it, involves going under the hood of your life. So like popping the car bonnet of your life and taking a look at what's really going on underneath the surface. And that really starts with your why. And you may well be thinking at this point, Soph, that all sounds a bit fluffy, but I'm very specifically talking about two things. And that is, number one, identifying your core values, the principles that matter most to you. And number two, setting a vision for the kind of life that you want to build. Without those, it's really easy to get stuck in motion without direction. You're busy and you're doing things, but you'll often find that you're not actually going anywhere meaningful. That's why I always come back to this quote from Mel Robbins: speed is nothing without direction. You can be the most organized, most motivated person in the room, but if you haven't taken the time to get really clear on where you're headed or what matters most to you, then it's always going to feel like something's missing. And one of the most helpful ways that I've found to think about this is to imagine that you're planning a flight. Your vision is the destination. It tells you where you're headed and it gives you a clear sense of direction and purpose. Your values, on the other hand, act more like your compass. Now imagine trying to fly a plane without a destination, or even worse, without any kind of navigation system. You might be going fast, but you also might be traveling to completely the wrong destination or drifting way off course in the process. Now, don't get me wrong, your flight path might not be perfectly linear. It might look more like this, or even this, or this, or this. And that's also not to say that there might not be a bit of turbulence along the way as well. But it is really important as a foundational principle to make sure that you know where you're going and why you want to go there. So ask yourself this: what kind of life do I actually want to build? And what values do I want to live by along the way? Oh, and I also want to stress that This doesn't have to be perfect or complete in any way, shape, or form. This is where I find so many people get stuck, including myself in the past. This kind of deep inner work can feel really uncomfortable. The pressure to figure everything out and have a perfect plan can really cause a lot of roadblocks before you've even begun. You don't need all the answers figured out perfectly right now. Just start. Your vision and values will naturally evolve as you evolve, and you should really think of this more like a working document, not something that you have to lock in forevermore. If you're not sure where to start, I've created a free core values workbook which will guide you through that entire process, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And if you're not sure what a life vision is or how to create one, then let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to do another video on that in future. Setting a vision is exciting and inspiring, but because of that, it can also feel a bit intangible sometimes. And that's totally okay. In fact, it's exactly where this next step comes in. According to research, we're 42% more likely to achieve our goals when we simply write them down. Personally, I like to do this at the start of the year, so I'll try and set myself just 1 to 3 stretch goals across different areas of my life, like health, personal growth, or finances, for example. And the key is to not overload yourself. I can't stress this enough. If you're anything like me, then you'll try and set loads of different goals at once. And when we think about it, there's no wonder that we don't achieve them. We've simply got far too much going on to be able to really dedicate the time, attention, and energy that each one of those needs. When you try to do everything, my experience is that you generally end up doing nothing very well. It's much better to focus on 1 or 2 things, build momentum, and then steadily work your way up from there. And one of the ways that I've really found to make goals feel more achievable is to break them down into more bite-sized milestones. So say my goal is to reach 24% body fat. I would create smaller milestones along the way. For example, when I reach 27% and then 26%, then 25%. And I would acknowledge and make sure I celebrate each of those as I hit them. And this is also where alignment becomes really important. If you pick a couple of goals that really align with your vision and values and you focus on them intently for a good 6 to 12 months, you will be amazed at the kind of progress that you can make when you put your mind to it. I once heard someone say, take a good look at your daily routine, because that's a good indicator of where you'll be in 10 years' time. And that has always really stuck with me. I think we often have a habit of overlooking those small daily choices that we make as being fairly inconsequential, but how you spend that time day after day shapes your entire life. And that's why I'm a great believer that intentional living isn't about making dramatic, overhauling changes to your life overnight. Instead, it's more about small, consistent actions. Actions that, when repeated daily, start to change the overall trajectory of your life. You can think about it like building a muscle. No one gets stronger instantly. You show up, you put in the work regularly, and you steadily grow into the person that you want to be. James Clear, I think, put it perfectly when he said, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And that's exactly what this pillar is about. Building systems that really support the kind of life that you want to live. And there are 2 key parts to this. So first is the habits that you build. And this is where you really start making autopilot work for you rather than against you. Because good habits are really like compound interest. Good systems reduce decision fatigue. They grow over time and pay off in ways that you can't always see on a day-to-day basis. I'm planning a separate video where I'll share the specific habits that I track and the ones that I feel have made the biggest difference in my life. And second is about the daily actions that you take. You can really think of this as your to-do list, so the concrete actions that you're taking every day to move closer towards those goals and your bigger overall vision. I think this is getting really clear on the 80-20 rule and working out what is the 20% of your efforts that are really driving 80% of the impact, because it's easy to spend a lot of time on small, inconsequential things that aren't really moving the needle towards the things you care about. So take a closer look at your daily systems and ask yourself, what simple changes could you make to make sure that you're working towards an intentional life, not just once in a while or when the motivation strikes, but every single day. Quick tea break. Pillar 4, reflect and review. Okay, so we've moved from the big picture, vision and values, right down to the nitty-gritty of your daily habits and daily action. Now, this is the part that I think is probably most overlooked when it comes to intentional living, and it's something that I certainly never used to prioritize either. That is setting up some kind of system to regularly review and reflect on your life. Reflection helps you course correct, adjust your path, and make sure that you're actually moving in the direction that you want to go. For me personally, this looks like a short daily reflection practice. It only takes a few minutes each morning, but it's really powerful. I will set my intention for the day. I will list 3 things that I'm grateful for. I will choose or set in advance what I want the highlight of my day to be. And I will also make sure I write down my number 1 priority for the day. And then in the evening, I'll just take a couple of minutes to log what went well, what didn't go so well, and any lessons that I can learn from that, as well as anything I can let go of before I go to sleep. Alongside that, I will track the habits that I'm trying to build each day. So I usually have anywhere between 7 and 10, but you might want to start a bit smaller than that when you are just building your first habits. And then I usually just log some daily stats. So things like my mood out of 5, my diet out of 5, how many hours sleep I got, as well as how many steps I got. And I do also like to track my weight as well. On top of that, I also do short weekly reviews, as well as bigger picture monthly reviews and yearly planning. And this practice might sound quite in depth, but it's really been a game changer for me. It helps me to analyze my own behavior, spot any patterns that I probably wouldn't have seen otherwise, and also just get to know myself on a much deeper level. Self-awareness really is a vital component of living an intentional life. Pillar 5, second brain. The last pillar that I want to talk about is lifelong learning. Something that doesn't always get the spotlight when we think about intentional living, but something which is absolutely essential. Most of us, I think, are guilty of assuming that education starts and stops with school, but real intentional growth means taking ownership of your own learning and continuously feeding your mind with new ideas, skills, and perspectives. To truly become the person you want to be and to reach those big goals that you set for yourself, you need to stay curious and keep expanding your knowledge. And I don't mean this in any kind of formal sense. I mean really following your interests and what excites you, whether that's watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, reading books, or really diving into any kind of format that you most enjoy learning from. I'll admit that I'm a bit of a geek, but over time, what I've come to realize is that it's really important to have somewhere that you can store all of that knowledge that you're accumulating. I can't count the number of times that I've had a really good idea or I've read something from someone and I can't for the life of me recall who it was or what they said. That's why I recommend creating what David Allen calls a second brain, a tool or system that helps you keep track of all your learning in one place. Intentional learning like this becomes the fuel that powers your progress. It really does give you an edge because most people don't put this kind of thought or effort into their ongoing education. So if you want to keep growing and pushing towards your vision, make sure to build a system that helps you capture and revisit what you're learning. It's honestly one of the smartest investments that you can make in yourself. I like to think of this intentional living framework a little bit like a flywheel. At first, it takes a lot of effort to get the thing moving. Those first few pushes can feel slow and maybe even frustrating. But every time you push, that flywheel builds momentum and starts spinning faster and faster. So the goal here really isn't to push harder every single day. It's just to keep turning that wheel little by little. And that really is the power of this process. As I mentioned earlier, if you want a way to put this whole system into action, then that's exactly why I created my Intentional Life OS. It's structured around these 5 core pillars that we've talked about, and it's the exact system that I use every single day to make sure that I am living an intentional life. If you'd like, I can also do a full tour of the Intentional Life OS if you'd like to see it in action and explore a bit more of how it works. Just let me know in the comments if that is something that you would like to see. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.